What is your wrong place at the wrong time story? Story 1. I was playing baseball with a bunch of other kids in the neighborhood. I hit the ball into the woods, so I went to go get it. After carefully stepping over a metric ton of thorns, I found it. I lean over to pick it up, and as I grab it, the bush in front of me starts shaking violently. I freeze. It shakes again. Then I hear my sister behind me. I glance back and see her in the middle of all the thorns. She whispers to run on the count of 3. She counts, and on 3, we book it out of there. We burst out of the edge of the woods and yell for everyone to run. No one else has any idea what's going on, but they all scatter. Of course, my sister and I live farthest away. I was pretty fast, so I made it home and immediately tried telling my mom what happened. But I was out of breath and had trouble explaining. My sister finally made it in the house. She's not very fast and she has asthma. I feel like a butt for leaving her behind, but luckily whatever it was didn't follow her. She starts telling my mom the same thing about shaking bushes. My mom insists it was just a dog. Whatever was on the other side of that bush was huge. We knew it wasn't a dog. I'm not sure if my mom actually believed that explanation or if she was just trying to calm us down. About an hour later, we got a call from a neighbor that she saw a bear and a cub in her yard. Now that I'm older, I realize just how lucky I am because that could have gone very wrong. Oh, I agree, especially if there's a cub involved. Bears can get pretty territorial just by themselves, but nope, you don't want to upset Mama Bear. Not at all. Nope, that sister was right to say run. Story 2. A friend of mine told me this one. It's more of a just barely not in the wrong place at the wrong time story. Back in the 70s, his mom was a young woman working at a diner. There was a guy who would come in on a regular basis. Super friendly, good-looking guy, always chatting with her and the other waitresses. Over time, he apparently became as much a part of the place as any of the workers. One night, my friend's mom's not feeling great. She phones up a coworker of hers to fill in for her, and the coworker agrees. She goes in to cover for her, and reportedly gets a ride home at the end of the night by their most charming regular. Next day, she's gone. No one hears from her, and eventually she turns up unalive. Turns out the charming guy is Ted Bundy. He'd been using the diner to pick out targets and lure the young women there away so he could, well, do his Ted Bundy thing. Had my friend's mom gone to work that night, chances are she would have been the one getting a ride home from him, and bam. No more mom, no more friend. Good thing she got sick, I suppose. That is chilling. I mean, people disappear all the time. And it doesn't make any difference if this guy was famous or not. He was one of those narcissists, so he would have charmed anyone out of there. But yeah, that is one very close call. Story 3. I was at a party the other night, and one of the guys there told me this story. His dad decided to backpack from England to Thailand in 1979. By late December 1979, he had made it roughly halfway to his destination, which put him in Afghanistan. On the morning of December 24th, 1979, he and his friends got up and were planning to do some rock climbing. They got in the Jeep of a guy that they paid to bring them out to rock climb. When they got in, he told them that they weren't going rock climbing that day, and instead, he was heading for Pakistan, and they could join him if they wanted to. Why the sudden change of plans? December 24th, 1979 is the day that the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. This guy's father has pictures of him standing on a hill with a few dozen or so Soviet tanks in the field below him. Edit. I haven't gotten the pictures. As I said in the beginning of the post, this story was told to me by a guy that I randomly met at a party and will probably never see or speak to again. I don't know his last name or how to get a hold of him, so unfortunately, this story is all that we've got. Can you imagine being at the literal ground zero of a historic event like that? And do you think one of his friends complained that they weren't going rock climbing and the other one saying, "Shut up, we're getting out of here alive"? Story 4. Finally, a place to share this. When I was in kindergarten, I went to a daycare and it was brutal. Every man for himself. One day we got let out to recess, and I, still young and innocent, sat in the grass right in front of the back door we got out of the school by. The teacher sat down in front of me about 20 feet away by the mulch bin to watch the other kids, and I was relaxing in the sun when I saw some scissors fly over my shoulder and land a few feet to the side of the teacher in her chair. Now, there were some kids around me, and one of them threw it, but she turned around to them, all playing, and my dumb young self was staring at her. She assumed it was me and made me go inside and sit with the principal for the rest of our 30-minute recess. Now, I don't give a care because I was a thug anyway, but I did eternally resent that lady for the rest of my childhood for not completing a proper investigation. I told her that I didn't do it, and she didn't believe me. What type of a world do we live in that you can't just ever trust your kindergarten teachers? But I guess I can understand. I kind of feel bad for hating her all that time when I can understand now. Wherever you are out there, Ms. Linda, curse you a little less today. Story 5. When I was somewhere around 25, a few of my friends and myself spent a week in Daytona Beach and had a great time. Driving back to New York, somewhere in northern Georgia, we decided to grab some food at a truck stop. After our greasy burgers and fries, we exited the diner and were heading across the parking lot. We came upon two men, nervously transferring stacks of cash from the trunk of one car to another. Both men had handguns holstered beneath their jackets, and as they noticed us, noticing them, one of the men made a quick movement to grab his pistol, but the other man stopped him, and they just ceased what they were doing and stared quite intently at us. If there was ever a wrong place at the wrong time, this was it. All of us acted as if we were oblivious to the men's actions, but we, and when I say we, I mean everyone, the two men included, knew better. We quickly made our way to our car and left for the next 4 to 6 hours. None of us in the car said a word. My neck was sore as hell from craning it back and forth, constantly scanning for their car, which I visualized speeding up along next to us as we traveled down the highway. We never saw the men again. Story 6. Happened recently with a friend during the recent influx of refugees in Austria. He's from India, so quite often he gets confused as Middle Eastern. He was on his way back home from the supermarket when he needed to pee badly. So he walked into a nearby bar. As he was walking in, he noticed a commotion going on in there. Also, there were quite a few cops going inside as he walked in. Turns out an Afghan refugee had swiped some lady's phone and was caught in the act by an onlooker. He was refusing to give back the phone and kept insisting he didn't steal it, so the cops were called in. My friend, unfazed by the commotion, was emptying his bladder in the urinal when there was a knock on the door. "Polizia!" So he got out immediately, and they asked him for his identification papers. Despite doing this, he was singled out and frisked in front of everyone when one of the victim's friends said he wasn't anywhere near when the swipe happened. They let him go, but he was really disturbed by this. They eventually found the phone hidden behind that refugee's seat, and he, Afghan guy, was handcuffed and taken away. Kind of a hard one to read there, and hard lesson to learn. Racism exists no matter where you are, unfortunately. Story 7. One of my friends was finishing year 12, last year of high school in Australia, and had his muck-up day, which involves a scavenger hunt where you complete tasks for points. 50 points for stealing a local sign, etc. He came over to my house at about 2 p.m. in the afternoon to borrow a balaclava as he needed it for one of his tasks. I walked out of my house to meet him on the road wearing the balaclava as I thought it would be funny. I spoke to him for about a minute while wearing it, then handed it over. Around then, I noticed a family a few doors up from my house staring and pointing at us. I'm a fairly shy person, so I said, "See you later," and walked inside. A few minutes later, my dad pulled up at home, he's a real estate agent, and told me that some people staying in units he rents out were robbed about 10 minutes ago, and they saw someone in a balaclava walking around the front of our house. A few phones, a laptop, and some handbags got stolen, and I had to walk up the road and explain the situation to people. I still don't think they fully believed that I didn't do it either because they were so shocked at being robbed in broad daylight. No one will probably see this because it's an old thread and I wasted like 10 minutes. Story 8. A few years ago, my girlfriend and I had just moved into a new apartment in a really nice area. About 2 months later, we had a brick thrown through a back window, but assumed it was some neighborhood kid being a douche. A few days after that, we had 6 guys with guns break into the unit while we were there, pistol whipped us, and took most of our electronics, etc. They robbed the place because the previous tenant was an illicit substance dealer who apparently owed them a bunch of money, and they didn't get the memo that he had skipped town. Damn, that's scary. I worked with a guy who robbed illicit substance dealers. Not only would he rob them, he would wreck their stuff up, and he told me that one time he actually took a dump on someone's record player. The guy did 12 years in the old Montana State Prison. Story 9. I was a pretty typical Midwestern 19-year-old guy. I had an awful job at a restaurant, lived in an awful house with some roommates, partied, the usual. Well, part of my usual was to ride my bike to and from work, and I'd often stop by the river and smoke a bowl before I got home. So I'd just completed this bowl smoking ritual and had adopted some high-volume atmosphere on my headphones. I was pedaling my bike down the sidewalk, higher than a giraffe vagina, basically staring at the sidewalk in front of me. You know, living life. I'm about 3 blocks from home, and there's an intersection coming up, so my attention shifts from the 10 feet of sidewalk in front of me for the first time in blocks. I look to my left and see some movement of bodies wearing black. Look to my right and see a line of cop cars, and subsequently a line of cops. Guns drawn. I was pedaling through the very start of a no-knock, lethally armed, SWAT-supported raid. My mouth opened just enough to show my surprise and immediate regret. Of the 6 cops on my right, one just slowly shook his head in disbelief when the others stared in awe. I didn't breathe till I was out of the potential crossfire and didn't look back till I got home. Too long didn't read? High as a giraffe vagina, caught in a pig orgy. Oh, that last sentence, the wordplay was just really well done. I applaud that. But man, it is just so fortunate that no one stopped him and tried to pin some kind of obstruction of justice on the guy. And then get some other charges added later on. He was in the wrong place, but it was fortunate that he was able to just pass through. Thankfully. Story 10. During my freshman year of high school, there was a huge food fight and a ton of actual fighting that happened. Just to give you an idea of how bad it was, a newspaper for the Southern California area wrote an article calling them riots and said they were over the election. Neither of those were true, but we had a lot of police on campus, and they shortened our passing period to about 2 minutes. During the big food fight, my butt was just trying to get away from everything. That is, until some jerkwad decided to throw a rock the size of a baseball at my back. I had a huge welt on my back for about a year, and then some jerkwad teacher tried to give me detention for participating in the food fight. Since when is a rock food? Story 11. Guy got mugged in front of my house in Seattle. Used to be a rough neighborhood. I was bent down behind a trash can a few feet away, pulling weeds. Heard some scuffling and a struggle, stood up because I was curious, and saw an older man on the ground with a younger guy kneeling on his back, digging his wallet out of his pocket. I happened to be holding my steel shovel. Mugger looked up, saw me looming over them with a huge shovel, yelped, sprang backwards, crashed into a telephone pole, bounced forward from it onto his face on the sidewalk while I watched, just standing there, holding my shovel. He looked up at me, terrified, as if I'd done all of this to him, and started apologizing. I grunted, "My cursing street, not yours. Take off." Dude scrambled backwards from me on all fours and ran off like I was shooting at him. Wrong place, wrong time. Hilarious in retrospect, but at the time I was just puzzled, concerned, and grumpy. Story 12. My brother has autism. He's also extremely overweight. His weight and mental disabilities have handicapped his ability to clean himself after he uses the bathroom, and sometimes you have to help him out. So I'm in the living room, and I see my brother run into the bathroom flapping his arms. He thinks he's a bird. This usually means he's about to poop his brains out. You're usually able to tell he's done when he stops his pooping squeal, which is this deity-awful noise he makes as he passes his lard logs through his butthole. After the squealing stops, I give him a minute and walk in to get the cleaning done. I walk into the bathroom to do the chore, but my brother insists that he can do it himself and that he made an invention. All right, I give him some space, and I hear some grunting, but that would be normal if you had to get through all your frickin' fat rolls to touch your butt. So I walk in to check on him, and I see that he has a quarter of the plunger handle up his butthole. He stares into my eyes and doesn't say a deity-damn word. He continues to put said handle up his butt while staring into my eyes. He perished of cancer 2 years later because of unrelated reasons. Story 13. I once almost got kicked out of high school. I was at my physics club meeting. It ran late and I was heading to the car. Some girl popped out of a room just as I walked by, startling me. I jumped a bit and gasped, kept moving. Next day, I called the principal's office. I was accused of, get this, videotaping girls changing. Now, being 17 at the time, I would have loved to have that magical video, but alas, it was 2002 and no one had any such recording device, and no tape. I was still made to serve a week suspension due to how this looked. It was a private Catholic school. Nothing at all could be done ever about anything. There are no rules or justice in those schools unless you're popular or have money. Story 14. A little late, but curse it, I hardly ever post. A friend and I were smoking in his car when he mentioned a name and asked if I knew it. I said no, but asked who it was. Apparently, it was his old friend who perished in a car crash. He was driving in his convertible on the freeway with his friend in passenger and his mom in back in the carpool lane. Then out of nowhere from the other end of the freeway, a giant tire flew off a semi and hit the driver's side of the car. He was terminated on impact, but his friend and mom were fine. His mom said, I was putting my son's face back together thinking it would work. And his friend in the car said that if he was 1 second faster or 1 second slower, everything would be different. If he had lost his keys and found them 5 seconds later, or picked up a stray nickel on the ground, he would have been fine. That really made me think about things.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 15. Several years ago, I bought cocaina in Amsterdam. Was pretty sly about it, or so I thought. Bought it, then a few seconds later, a cop came up and asked me if I'd just bought illicit substances. The bag was still in my hand, so I slyly tossed it into the gutter behind me. I was beside myself. I told the cop I was going to buy something, but changed my mind. I became very apologetic and said I was from America and thought all illicit substances were legal in the Netherlands. He was very nice and let me off with a warning and a lecture. Went back a half hour later and grabbed the bag from the gutter. Man, cocaina wasn't worth the risk. Back in my stupid days. Story 16. Summer 1998. We were in Washington, D.C. on vacation checking out various monuments and whatnot. The Smithsonian, Washington Monument, Vietnam Memorial. They had the White House open for people who wanted to check it out, and it was kind of cool. One day we went to the Capitol building for a tour. There's a big area with a lot of statues of notable people donated by the various states. And that leads to another area, and you can look down and see people entering the area with the statues. We hear 2 or 3 loud bangs and assume the statues had fallen over somehow. But people were totally panicking below us, hauling butt to get out of there. Some poor girl gets knocked down and dragged out of the way. Turns out some guy had run into the building and started shooting, unaliving 2 officers before he was wounded. got stuck there for hours. I was only 9 at the time, so the severity of the situation didn't really register. I kept asking my parents why we weren't allowed to leave. Story 17. When I was 6, it was Bonfire night, and I was meant to be asleep. Of course, me and my twin brother were still awake watching the fireworks. My mom came in and asked us if we wanted to go out. We went to our next-door neighbor's house and stood outside. We were having a really good time. Then, one of the fireworks didn't explode. It fell out of the sky and bounced right off the pavement, right next to my neck, then exploded. My neck was on fire and my mom rushed me into a shower. It was crazy. 6 months later, I got out of the hospital. So many surgeries as well. I'll still be getting surgery until I'm 18 or even older. Oh, and my brother got PTSD or something like that. It was hell. Story 18. My school has a housing option where you live in small cabins on a nearby lake. Also, at this location, there are several outdoor classrooms and a fire pit. I was living in town in the summer between school years with a friend who was moving into these cabins that year. The week before the semester started, we decided to drive out there to check out the cabin. We forgot that one of the lunch ladies lives at a house on site year-round and has a hot tub. As we pull up, she doesn't notice us, jumps out of the hot tub wearing nothing, squats, and starts peeing. After sitting there for a second, we slowly started backing out. To this day, I can't make eye contact with her when I go to eat at the school. Story 19. I used to play baseball back in high school. When it would rain, we would practice on the basketball courts in our gym. My buddy and I are playing catch, and at this point we're at opposite ends of the court throwing fairly hard. As I release a throw, I notice a door behind my friend opening. As it opens outward, it pushes his arm forward, causing him to narrowly miss the ball. On the other side of that door was someone walking to the girls' locker room holding a cake and balloons, as it was her birthday. The ball laser beamed through the doorway and nailed this poor girl in the forehead. She dropped, sending the cake to the ground and the balloons to the roof of the gym. She ended up being okay, aside from having baseball seam imprints on her head for the next few days. Story 20. Driving down a 3-lane street in El Salvador, I was in the middle lane. As I came around a curve, there's a police truck parked with 7 heavily armed cops jumping out to go for a raid in a ghetto. The police are in the left lane, and there's too much traffic in the right lane to change lanes. The cop in the passenger side opens his door without looking, and I slam on the brakes to avoid unaliving him. My windows were too tinted so he couldn't see me, and all he knows is that there's an SUV parked a meter away as he's about to do a dangerous raid. Needless to say, I was looking down the barrel of an assault rifle very quickly. Story 21. About a year before I realized I needed glasses, I was on a school trip for a week. The building was somehow built into a cliff, with a plaza leaning over it from which you could look into some of the windows. Now, as I later found out, some of those windows lead to the girls' showers. A group of friends were standing there, gawking and shouting that we should all get over there. Many boys with smiles, and then some girls with disgust on their faces were gathering there. Most guys realized what was going to happen and bolted. Me and my best friends were still there when the teacher came. I got detention along with them for something I unfortunately didn't see, and I still didn't realize I needed glasses. Yet. Story 22. I was playing in the street with some friends in high school. One friend was having a gay old time kicking his shoes off to see how far they would go. Well, Mr. Soccerman decided to kick it low and hard in my general direction, promptly nailing me directly in the nuts. I rolled around on the ground for quite a while, writhing in pain. Bonus: sitting on my porch minding my own business when I was younger, elementary school, while my stepdad and brother practiced pitching a baseball. Well, one thing leads to another, and the ball rolls right off his finger weirdly, and the ball hits me right in the nuts. Story 23. I was first on the scene of a single-car drunk driving accident. It was about 2:30 in the morning, and I was heading over to a friend's house to take a shower because my hot water heater broke the day before. My friend had just gotten off work, which is why I was out so late. As I was passing over a bridge, I randomly saw this guy laying face down on the pavement. I called 911 and let him know he's not alone. He unfortunately perished before they arrived. Apparently, he was the passenger in an SUV, and the driver had been going about 80 miles per hour when they hit the bridge. He tried jumping out before it went off the bridge, and the SUV had whipped around and hit him. Story 24. This happened to a coworker's son. He was outside smoking a cigarette, and apparently there was a police chase going on that he didn't know about. The police dog jumped over the fence into his backyard and attacked him, really messing up his arm from what I understand. The cops end up throwing him in the police car. After realizing that they had the wrong guy, they let him go and literally tell him, "Well, maybe you should have stayed inside." He's currently going through a lawsuit with them and is probably going to get a big settlement, because they never even filed a police report or anything. Story 25. Was at the camping area of a large outdoor music festival. Started throwing a football around with my friend in the passages between the clusters of tents. Ball misses me and went into a semi-open party tent. I went in after it, only to find it between some huge guys covered in white powder with my ball in the middle next to an empty clip bag. It was cocaina. I'm only alive due to the dealer being close by and didn't want the attention as he sold a lot at the festival. He gave them more for free, basically. Story 26. After a long night of drinking at the bars, I stumbled back to my dorm. Somewhere on this journey, I messed up my hand, like I needed stitches bad. Being drunk, I didn't even notice I was a stumbling, bloody mess, so I decided I should keep the night going with my friends who live in the dorm next door. Now, the best way to drunkenly enter a room is to kick open the door and yell "freeze" with your finger gun drawn like I always do, but it just so happens the police were in the room giving my friends a citation for weed. They didn't even flinch and casually asked where I live. I told them I'd be next door and almost sprinted out of there to my friend's dorm nearby. Surprised I didn't get shot or at least questioned. Story 27. My school takes kids on trips around the world for March break. Guess who happened to be in Japan because of the big earthquake/tsunami a few years back? A group of Canadian teenagers and teachers. One teacher that was there, all the students are probably in college now, tells of when they were in a bus when the quake hit and the driver was swerving left and right a little, which they thought was a joke. They were laughing until they noticed the skyscrapers flailing about. Apparently, the Japanese were running up to them in the street mid-quake to apologize for the earthquake as well. Story 28. I went to the wrong classroom on the first day in high school. When I realized about 2 minutes in, I raised my hand. My hand stayed up for way too long after the teacher noticed me. I had to keep switching hands, and she kept giving me glaring looks. When she finally decided to give in and call on me, I told her I was in the wrong class. She said it was too bad I couldn't leave halfway through, so I had to stay for the rest of the period and miss the entirety of my real first class. Shrew. I still kick myself that I was shy and not bold enough to just leave. Story 29. Took a different route home one day to pick up my car because I got drunk the previous night and left my car in a parking lot. Ended up crossing paths with a group of close friends and stayed there for a while. Tragedy ensued as a construction crumbled down upon us, injuring 2 and unaliving 3. I was unharmed, but had my back turned and didn't even see it happen. When I turned around, I saw it had crumbled literally 2 inches from my feet. To this day, I still don't know if me being there made us stay longer in that particular place. Worst day of my life. Story 30. One of my dad's friends was at a party and the cop showed up. He was facing the other way, and he fit the description of someone that robbed a house earlier that day. So the cop told him to hold his hands up and not move. So even before my dad's friend turned around so the cop could verify that he was the suspect, the cop took out his baton and hit him and broke his hand and wrestled him to the ground. Then found out he wasn't the guy. Pretty awful situation in the wrong place, wrong time. Story 31. I was just about to head home after a night out in London, so I was casually standing at the coat check waiting my turn. However, I happened to be standing at the coat check when a guy was being thrown out of the club. This guy happened to be a little crazy because as he went past me, he grabbed my shoulder, went to headbutt me, and at the same time bit a chunk out of my lip. I ended up needing plastic surgery on my lip, and about 5 years on, I still have no feeling in that part of my lip. Story 32. Locked in a jail cell with over 30 strangers in a town I wasn't from. Large concert, many arrests, I was drinking underage. It turns out I am the spitting image of one of the local illicit substance dealer/gangster jerkwads. Everyone in there was either talking to me like I was a rock star or wanted to terminate me. I tried to explain that I wasn't the guy, and everyone just thought I was trying to hide my identity. The story is much more bizarre than that, but who the hell is even going to read this comment?
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.